Hey, welcome to the Joyful Rebels podcast. You've got Claire and Donna Thomas here, your mother daughter duo, coming at you with a brand new episode today. So, I've got a question for all you listening. How flexible are you? And no, I don't mean physical or gymnastics, yoga, any of that. Today, we're going to focus on what we're going to call inner flexibility. Okay, so we're going to reflect today and discuss a pretty cool article that we discovered, and we'll share that in the show notes.
Mhm.
But the idea is when we're talking about what's important to share, skills that we want to share either with your kids or with, young adults, the next population, the next
Mhm.
generation, excuse me. Um, the most important ones aren't going to necessarily be, having a strong willpower, really grinding, like nose down, always high intensity. We're seeing right now that this idea, again, of psychological flexibility, it's going to lead to more empowered outcomes. They're going to feel like you're able to manage your emotions more, maybe experience less negative emotions. So that's what we're going to talk about today. And there's some cool research that is behind this that is justification for why we would want to focus on these inner flexibility skills. So there was a longitudinal study of parents, and what that means is that they followed the same group of people across time. So they looked at them across different points in time, asking the same questions. So they followed a group of parents through the pandemic.
Mm.
And what they found is that parents who scored higher in both awareness and being in the present moment, staying objective and accepting thoughts and feelings, experienced less stress and depressive symptoms during the pandemic. And so this study, they really pegged those skills as things that are going to be important skills to be teaching our kids and the next generation. And it this conglomerate of skills was referred to, one psychologist has coined this term, momentology. Momentology. So I feel kind of silly saying it, but I like it. Okay, so mom, do you want to maybe tell us what is momentology? And no, we're not saying Scientology, momentology here.
Oh, I love that it's kind of goofy and it's making me laugh just because it's a new silly word, but it really represents a what I would call an emotional um, agility.
Mm.
And I appreciate that there's now newer language around it. Because again, this keeps coming up where it's like, oh, I didn't know how to describe that, or I didn't know what that was. So things, we go through our lives and we're in situations and it's not always easy to identify. Therefore, it makes it a little more challenging to process and make sense of. So the more that we drill into and put some labels or some ways to describe things, it paints a word picture. And then I get a chance to go, oh, that's what that is. And it makes sense in how it relates to me. So momentology, which I think is awesome, it's active. So well, I love that it is this set of ways to have some skills, some active ways to do it, where it's not just thinking your way out of something. And I want to be really clear with that, that it's inner skills that are in our daily work. That there's ways to show up and how we perceive things that aren't always what I'm finding my first or gut reaction. So I'm always like walk into situations these days as I'm continuing to learn myself in this situation in this season, that it's like sometimes my first response to something is kind of old. Like that's how I thought. Like when you talked about grinding and having grit and resiliency and those messages, like gosh, it makes me tired just thinking of that. Because that I think advances whatever you're doing this far, and my fingers are like an inch apart. And I want to have more flexibility. I want to have more choices, and I want to understand on a broader scale. And we talk often about being present and being aware. And this seems to be the love child of being present and being aware, is being in the moment and using being in the moment to then land on some ways that we're thinking and feeling, because then we get to respond rather than react. So I'm finding it show up in my life, and especially this week where I thought a conversation was going to go one way and I had prepared myself for that. But before I got into this conversation that could have been really emotionally charged, I sat back for a second And Claire, I heard your words in my head, which I love that. Yeah. And I don't know if you're listening, if you ever have moments where you're like, oh, I thought I heard that somewhere, somewhere during the week. Maybe it's the podcast and hopefully it's some of your good friends and part of your tribe that's speaking over you. But I thought, I'm just going to stay open here. I'm grounded. I'm ready to go. And I'm not sure how this conversation is going to go. And I was able to stay agile enough that I actually saw when I thought it was going to go either one of three ways, a fourth way introduced itself. And I went, wow. And I wound up having this conversation. It was the least amount of being provocative as it needed to be. It got the point across. There was understanding on both sides. And I left the phone call going, that was super cool. And I believe by doing, when we talk about these concepts and these conversations that we have on the podcast, again, they may not be top of mind for you this week, but you will have them at the ready when you're in a situation. And I firmly believe that now because I had it happen before I'd even dug into this material too much, that these active choices to stay emotionally agile and look for different perspectives is a thing. There's more language around it, and hopefully that'll create more understanding as we move forward.
I love that emotional agility. I wrote that down because, the opposite is feeling, or how I view the opposite is feeling like you have no control and you're kind of at the whims and being pushed about. So being agile in my mind is I can see what's going on, that awareness. I'm in the moment, right? That combination that we talked about, that momentology, and then I can make better decisions for myself or have a better grasp about what's going on, a little bit more objective. So all of these skills are related again to this idea of inner flexibility or psychological flexibility. And so we've got four skills that again are framed as something that, hey, this is what we want to work on. This is what, if we can pass on something to a younger generation, it would be these, because the benefit then are more emotionally agile humans. So the first one, and this comes up in my life daily, I would say, don't believe everything you think. Okay. And this is a conversation that's on repeat at this point with my 9, almost 10-year-old daughter. But what we think about, what we put our attention to, our mind is going to keep going there. And our brain will believe what we tell it. And so those two things are something that I like to address when I'm talking to my daughter. So that's empowering because then we can use that to our benefit. So let's say you're someone that's feeding yourself just information that's not accurate. Oh, I'm the worst at this. Oh, I'm not going to be able to do this. Limiting beliefs, these things start spinning around in our head. One of the things we can do is start to question that. Why? What is the evidence there? And I always like that. I tell my daughter that all the time. What's the evidence? Or sometimes you can go down the path of what's the worst? What's the worst thing that can happen? Let's just explore that because it's really not going to be as bad as it feels like it can be. But when we think about this idea of don't believe everything you think, thoughts will pass if we quit putting that fuel on the fire. So if we're
Yes.
aware of these thoughts happening, if we can have that moment then when we're like, okay, this is happening right now, I'm noticing that I'm saying these things, you then have a choice. You can start to I mean, there's so many different strategies there, but if we can start to focus on something else or just that acknowledgement, this is not real. We're not going to be feeding that fuel anymore. And so, again, this is something that comes up all the time with my almost 10-year-old, but I find it happening in my own life as well.
Mm.
We don't need to believe everything that we think. And that second piece of it is that our brain will believe what we tell it. And so let's start replacing that. So if you can be in the moment and aware, oh, no, that false belief is coming up. Let's start feeding it something else. Okay. No, I am capable. And hey, we haven't brought it up in a while. It might be the longest we haven't brought it up. But if you've got that wins journal handy,
Yeah.
that is your running list of evidence of why you are awesome, or it can counter that voice in there that's telling you that you're not capable. So, number one skill for psychological flexibility, don't believe everything you think. The second skill is to work on owning the moment, not stuff. And so, what does that mean? It means basically what it says it outright, like material things. If our goal is to get something, achieve something, but if we're focused on the material side of it, that can feel kind of empty or external. When we're talking about this awareness and this mindfulness, we want to savor the actual moment. And so we'll talk about this at the end in our call to action of what we're going to do this week. But maybe something that we can focus on is when we are inside of a moment to be enjoying that moment, to not be thinking about in the future what needs to happen, to not be focusing on things that occurred in the past. And this type of language comes up all the time when I'm teaching a yoga class. And mom, I'm sure it comes up with you. It's
Mm.
really tied into this idea of mindfulness, but it's being intentional about enjoying that that intangible aspect of the moment. What is enjoyable? What emotions am I feeling now? And we talked about this with happiness and with looking for awe and joy. It's being able to kind of step away from that, maybe that negative lens that we have, or that, oh, I need this, I need this, I need this, and just enjoy that moment that you're in. So really focus on kind of that mantra, let's own the moment. So that's what we have for the first two. Don't believe everything you think, and own the moment that you're in, not the stuff involved in it.
Yeah. Oh gosh. Those are they're big and they're beautiful and they encompass so many situations and just places that I find myself on the daily. The one that really resonated for me out of those first two, we've got two more coming. The don't believe everything you hear. For me, how that shows up is it's just an old message of from God knows when. And so whenever here's my hack, is if I'm in a situation and there's going to be some kind of reaction, there's some potency to it. The first thing that comes into my head or my heart is not always the thing where I land. So just because it's the first thing that comes in there just means it's familiar. That just means it's been around there for a while. That's my clue. Instead of just running with that because that's like, oh, that must be my gut reaction. That must be the truth. That just means the thing that I've gone to the most often. I've done the most reps in that space. That doesn't mean that it applies now at all. So for me, it's the having the thing and having the first reaction, feeling whatever. The speed with which I have that 1-2 punch right there lets me know that that's probably old, which is helpful to me because I'm like, oh, okay, then it's open for review. Is it true? Have I checked my wins journal lately? Which right now I've got it right next to my laptop right here, which I haven't had it for the last week, and I will bring that back out. So thanks, Claire. Um, I do appreciate that reminder. And why is it so easy? Things just fall off. There's just a yearning for our attention from all these different ways. And it's up to us, not just to think our way out, but to go, I will think about it and I will do this and this. We have a responsibility in this. So thanks for reminding me of that. I don't mean that in a bad way. It's a good way. I need some reminders. Okay. So we've got the first two. As we have another couple of them, they're I love how they're in the same lane, but they take on different dimensions. The third one would be accepting the pain of no control as one of the biggest flex of all time. I love that, the biggest flex. When you're in pain, like there's when you have no control over a situation, which spoiler alert, probably is everything, and you feel that for a moment, it's not a passive thing. And this is my lens that I'm saying when it'd be like, okay, I just accept I have no control here. Almost, I get the visual and I'm doing it if you're watching it on YouTube, kind of like a bug on its back. Like I don't have any control. I am vulnerable. I am open to whatever happens. And that could be good and bad things, but it feels less protected. And that when you're in a painful situation, the natural response is to protect. But really, if you come from a perspective of you really don't have any control, then what does it look like? So I don't have to spend my energy wrestling for control. Now I'm just like, okay, I'm not being passive. This is actually a very active decision that I'm making. It changes the game. It changes the game completely because it's not giving up. And sometimes I think when we talk about surrendering, letting go of control, those things, it means that you don't have any responsibility in it. And I don't think that's the truth. I think that I loosen my grip on the outcome. I'm not worried about what the outcome is. I'm just in the moment now. And one phrase that really comes back to me over and over again is that in the chaos, there will be opportunity. in the chaos of whatever your situation is, there will be opportunity. And I think that comes from Pastor Craig Rochelle, who's a great leader. And it's so true. And I keep getting reaffirmed that that is a thing. So I don't feel like this. If I'm holding on too tightly, I'm in trouble. That means I'm trying to change it. And to the earlier point that you made, Claire, about that if I'm trying to change things or take a look at them and run them through my own filter, I'm just taking a lot of energy and wasting it instead of just going, you know what, I'm going to sit in what this is right now and feel it, which actually is a decision,
Mm-hmm.
and then follow it up with a little bit of action. So again, I like it that it isn't passive. It is a way to use these moments, um, because actually through pain too, there's going to be some changes. It is a feeling. Love it. Then the last one is I love the disciplined doing of what resonates, not just with me, it's all of us, with the world, with the other people around me. So it's pulling the lens back a little bit when I am in the weeds. And that in my corporate life was such a phrase that we would talk about. You're just in the weeds, you're down in it. But it makes sense when I'm really in all of um, the details of things. I forget that we're all connected. And what is about me is maybe not, it's one way to look at things, but when I pull the lens back and look at how is it for us and how in my community with my friend group and family and the world, I find I make different choices. I make way different choices because I hadn't considered anything else. And that is a gosh, my first thought was I strive for that. I would like to just have that come naturally, but to just we are all connected, and the more that the language for me is when I pick my head up and I look around, then there's all these things that are happening. There's an interplay of all of this. Then I don't feel like I'm alone. I don't feel like it's only on me to fix things or change things. There are circumstances that are out of my control that actually could work in my benefit, and I won't know all of them. So when I go through that, I'm taking the posture of being um, curious and being delighted, and it's like an adventure. And it's like I don't know how this is going to go, but it's bigger than me, and that is very comforting on so many levels. I don't know. Does that any of that ringing a bell with you, Claire?
Yeah, and I especially like how you were talking about that accepting that things are beyond our control is an action because you're actively making that
Mm,
decision. Because I like to think about what happens when it's the other way around. When you think that you've got this control, and it's the shoulds. This should be
mhm,
happening. If you've ever felt like you're really reactive and you hear that term like knee jerk reaction, and for me, it's always the example of being in traffic because I still, even when I try to work on it, if something happens in traffic, I'm like, I got that first, like you said, familiar. I have maybe a lot of reps in that kind of anger response, but it's because of what I think should be happening. That person should not do that to me. I am driving great. And why? And what that means is you're setting yourself on a path that's going to inevitably lead into some negative emotions. If you are saying, oh, things should be this way, if you think that there's some master control that you have over it. So again, I think it's powerful. It's a big decision to have that acknowledgement that no, we don't have that control over it all. And also that acknowledgement that it's not just that me, it's that we. So those work together for me
mhm,
to say, I don't have control over everything, but that actually feels empowering. So maybe that sounds silly or contradictory, but it takes a lot of that pressure or that reactivity out
mhm,
of at least personally my life and gives me that choice. And I love how you said that again, that first reaction that you do, that's probably something that you've just done for a long time. You're just used to it. It's that muscle memory, right? And so, hey, and again, I wrote, you see, if you're on YouTube, I've got my pen. It's
yeah,
open for review. Oh,
yeah,
that was my first response. That's
mm,
probably just because I've done that for a long time. So, to recap, these four skills that we're calling this part of this psychological flexibility that is important to teach young people, but also for us to incorporate, because
mhm,
I'm looking at this like, ooh, I can be working on all these too. Don't believe everything you think, own the moment, like be in the moment, accept that you don't have total control, and think big picture. Think it's not just you. It's you and you're connected, all your connections, your community, those people around you. And by encompassing those skills, you will be able to have more creativity, more energy, more ability to focus on your awareness and being in the moment. So, all that to say, here is your go to action for this week. And it's called Catch the Lightning Bug Moment. And I actually love this because this summer, mom, you know this, when we were at
Mhm.
home, my kids noticed lightning bugs for the first time. And actually, before this podcast, I was pulling up numbers, and yeah, lightning bugs are in serious decline in a lot of the United States because I remember as a kid
Yeah.
going out and I remember the exact jar with like the rubber orange kind of mason jar like top on it. Like I remember this, and we just don't really see them. We haven't really seen them in Louisiana. So yes, there is a decline in fireflies if you've noticed that as well, but they were out in Lombard in the summer and my kids were just so amazed. So we would creep out, at dusk, start looking around. But here's the idea. If you are looking for lightning bugs, but you're not in the moment and aware and looking around for lightning bugs, you're going to miss them
Mhm.
because I'm assuming if you're listening to this, you've seen a lightning bug or firefly, but they flicker on and off. They light up and then they don't. And it's getting dark out and your eyes are adjusting, when they're lighting up. So if you're not actively looking for them and aware and in the moment, you're going to miss them. You can't be thinking about what you're going to do with the lightning bugs. You can't be reminiscing, lost in a moment about what you did when you were a kid with them. You've got to be out there looking.
Mhm.
So we're going to use that mindset this week. So here again is your to do. You can either plan, like you've got an event happening, maybe something with your family or something with a friend, or you're going to just be aware and find a moment in your week where you can do three things. When you're in the midst of an activity, you're going to, one, be in the moment. Say to yourself, only this moment. This moment is what I'm going to focus on. And maybe you say it out loud because, again, it's so
Mhm.
easy to start fast forward or go back in time. You're going to say, I'm in this moment. Then, if you start having some shoulds, this should be happening. Oh, I'm at a fest and we should be having this great time. And they should be, no, no, no. Get rid of the shoulds. Once the shoulds come out, you're aware of it. Boop, I'm not putting any attention on that or fuel on that fire. And then finally, and most importantly, maybe, you're just going to notice what is. There's no judgment there and no expectation and no shoulds and no trying to control. You are just putting your attention in the moment. Notice what is that beautiful mixture of awareness and mindfulness. So, you listening, you're going to try that this week. I'm going to try that this week. Mom, you're going to try that this week.
Mhm.
And we're going to see how it goes. So, good luck with that. Until next time, Rebels.